Oh, the smell of turkey in the air. We are ready for Fantasy Football Live, the Week 12 edition. We'll be your turkeys over the course of the next hour and a half. For the next 90 minutes, we're going to be here getting you caught up and ready for everything you've got to know to set your fantasy football lineup. I'm your host, Jason Fitz, sitting with the great Matt Harmon, the absolutely incredible Chris Allen, and the wildly undefeated Justin Boone. This is the sort of world we live in. We're just hyped up and ready to go for the day. Harmon, you feel I'm not feeling the same level of joy. Like, I'm bringing you joy. I don't feel like I'm getting that same. Are we good? We good this morning?
To be honest with you, Fitz, no, we're not feeling that good because, you log in, on Sunday morning and you're just reminded about some of these lineups that you felt really excited about 3 weeks ago. And then you've got major injuries staring you back in the face. You've got no Josh Jacobs on the wire today. You've got no Drake London. He's sitting there in your IR spot. So there's a few teams that I was feeling pretty hyped up. Then I looked in to set those lineups this morning, feeling a little bit more down, but we'll try to pick it back up over the course of the show.
We have 90 minutes to get everybody set and ready for it, and by the end of it, we're all going to feel like we could run through walls. We'll run through walls. Have Chris Allen back with us this week. Buddy, we missed you last week. How are you feeling?
I'm doing well, and I would say I'm on the same lines as Harmon in terms of my feeling towards my fantasy, a lot of my fantasy rosters, but you guys know I'm a Bengals fan. I've had to accept a lot of the pain and anguish of the fantasy season so far. So I think at this point, it's just, well, what else could go wrong? What could be worse than having to sit through the number of losses so far? So even though we are going to talk through a lot of the injuries and a lot of the differing offenses that we're going to see because of the adjustments to a lot of the health of some of our players, at the same time, it's like, for me, I've already been living through this for the past 3 months. So what else do I've got to do?
You want to give everybody a peek behind the curtain on the sign? I'll let you say it. What's the sign today?
Happy T-Erky Day. We've got T. Higgins as the primary focus for the Bengals passing game because Jamar Chase decided he wanted to hock a loogie on Jalen Ramsey instead of playing football. So that's why we get it. It's a happy T-Erky Day. Of course it goes. It's also a seasonal holiday because we got Thanksgiving coming up. So for all those who observe, happy T-Erky Day to everybody.
That is spectacular. Well, Justin Boone, saving the best for last. You good sir, are the mashed potatoes and the gravy, all of the great sides at one. How we feeling today, buddy?
I'm feeling about the same as everybody else. And on Thursday's episode of the Fantasy Forecast, I wasn't going to bring this up, but Harmon asked me, like, who is a player who, it's not the stats, it's just a feeling that you think is going to have a good rest of the season. And I said A.D. Mitchell on the Jets now, right? That, like, it didn't look great. The public perception is way down. And yet I think he could have a good rest of the season. And I'm going to need him to, because I have a dynasty team where you start 13 players. And with Josh Jacobs out, there is not a lot of depth. And I'm going from Josh Jacobs to A.D. Mitchell in that lineup. So that's about where we're at here going into week 12.
Oh, man. If you ever thought you'd see manifesting, that was just an open of manifest, and I love it. Like, hey, speak it into destiny. Okay, for the next 90 minutes, we'll get you caught up. We're going to get you caught up on the actives, the inactives, and we'll answer a ton of your questions. All you got to do is hit us, #AskFFL, plus get the questions in the chat. All over the YouTube, we've got eyes on it, so we'll try and get as many answered as we can. Let's get to some of those actives, inactives that have everybody waiting with bated breath, and it starts with the active, inactive. Inactive this morning, we now know for sure Josh Jacobs not going to play. Aaron Rodgers not going to play. Joe Burrow on injured reserve, still not yet. He's off injured reserve at this point, but he hasn't been activated yet. And Ramondre Stevenson will be active in this game. Let's take a look at the late games in the afternoon. Alvin Kamara is expected to play. Chris Godwin is expected to play. Bucky Irving will be out. And as we heard earlier, Jamar Chase doesn't even have a spitting chance to get on the field today, so he will be out for that. See what I did there? Sunday night football, we've got some actives, inactives. We saw that already with Chris and Bucky. So there's a little bit of a sense of your actives, inactives. Let's get to some of what to watch in Week 12, what you have your eyes on. Justin Boone, give me what you got.
I mean, this is a perfect segue, because what is going to happen when Ramondre Stevenson returns to this Patriots backfield? And there's no possible way that they can go back to the way it was. It will blow all of our minds if that happens. TreVeyon Henderson in the last 3 games, just a massive breakout, showed he has that true star potential, showed he brings so much more juice to that Patriots backfield. And yet we know that coaching staff, we know how coaches feel about veteran guys that they really have faith in. We can at least see a scenario where Stevenson comes back and has a pretty big role. I don't think it's going to be 50-50. I don't think it's going to be Stevenson leading the way. I think it has to be Henderson's backfield, with Stevenson being that complementary piece. But here's the good thing, Fitz. They're going against the Bengals, and the Bengals let every running back go off against them, including multiple running backs per week most weeks, right? Like, we've seen 8 different teams where the second back on the team has put up at least 50 scrimmage yards and or a touchdown in the game against the Bengals. So I'm sorry, Chris, we always do this to you, but I think this is a game where you're going to be able to play Henderson, I think, still as a top 15 fantasy running back. And you might also be able to play Ramondre Stevenson as like a RB3 with some touchdown or bust upside. He could get up into the top 24, top 25 if he finds the end zone, which a lot of second running backs do against the Bengals.
Well, and that brings me to what I've got my eyes on, because Boone, you make such a good point. We all know in fantasy football, who you play matters as much as anything, right? So when we want to have these conversations about the Cowboys defense being fixed after last week, I will remind you, who you play matters, right? This weekend is what is fixed? Is it the Philly offense or the Cowboys defense? Now, plenty of people have come back and said, oh my God, look at what the Cowboys did last week. I talked to 3 different people that played in the league as offensive linemen, and I asked all 3 of them about the offensive line from my beloved Raiders that the Cowboys went up against. I had one person say, worst offensive line I've seen all year. I had the next person say, worst offensive line I've ever seen. And the third person said, I don't think a single person that played on that offensive line actually belongs in the NFL. That's context from 3 separate people of how bad the Raiders offensive line was. So if you're going to tell me that the Cowboys are fixed, I'm not sure we can say that. Now, the Eagles' offensive line hasn't been what it was last year, which is part of why their offense has struggled. But you watched a lot of TV shows over the last week that have talked to you about everybody coming back from injury and the big game that Quinn and Williams had and why that means the Cowboys' defense is back and the Cowboys are headed to the playoffs. We see all of these large narratives. Just remember, who you played mattered, and that's why 1 week isn't enough of a sample size for me yet to buy in to what we saw from the Cowboys defense. Yes, they're healthier. Yes, they're better. But I think we get a much better representation of where they actually stand this weekend against the Eagles, who also need the get-right opportunity against the Cowboys. We'll learn which side we can actually trust over the course of this game. All right, Chris, what do you got your eyes on in this matchup?
So for this matchup, I'm looking to see, can the Colts get back on track coming out of their bye? Because honestly, Indianapolis bye week could not come at a better time. I mean, this is the same team that through the first 2 months of the season had top 10 marks in offensive points scored per drive, EPA per drive. I mean, since the start of the century, and this was the same team that was struggling to or couldn't finish out games. But it's no mystery who the main problem is. I mean, it's like we're all trying to find the guy who did this meme. I mean, it's Daniel Jones. I mean, just looking at his box score, you could quickly make the case as to why all the goodwill he bought himself about being an improved quarterback is gone. I mean, after taking just 6 sacks through 7 games, Jones' 37.5% pressure to sack ratio over his last 3 games is the worst of any starter. I mean, he's 10 percentage points clear of Cam Ward. I mean, he has the most total and lost fumbles over this past 3 games. Interception rate is up. Fumbles, sacks, and turnovers also up over the past 3 games as well. I mean, but the thing is, however, while his sacks and turnovers have been something of drive killers, he's still been at or above the league average in passing success rate, which measures down-to-down efficiency. He hasn't fallen below 250 passing yards in any of those attempts. It actually has at least 1 passing score through the air in each of those games as well. So looking at Shane Steichen, I mean, who's been able to dial up play action concepts at the second highest rate throughout the league. I mean, he's just behind the Rams in terms of how often they use play action concepts. That's where we can see guys like Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, Tyler Warren really start to shine. So I know coming into this game, I mean, it should be solid options. I mean, a lot of those guys should be solid options for week 12. But now that they have to go into Arrowhead, having to play against Steve Spagnuolo, I mean, the combination of those 2 things won't be easy. But how he plays, if he's able to bounce back and still be a viable quarterback in this week 12 matchup, that's what I'm looking to see for the Colts as they make their path towards the playoffs.
We saved the best for last. Harmon, what do you got for us? What do you have your eyes on this week?
Well, I don't know about best for last. I think you guys had some good analysis there, but I am at least looking at Chris Olave this week and whether we can see sort of the narrative that I painted last week about him as a buy before the trade deadline, a second half of the season riser. Looking at him this week to see if we see any signs that is what is going to happen here. Chris Olave, season high 141 air yards in week 10, that game before their bye week. Rookie Tyler Shuck, much more willing to rip it downfield to Chris Olave, especially outside the numbers in that game against Carolina. Shuck finished 11 of 16 for 202 yards and both of his touchdowns on throws outside the numbers. And theoretically, you can attack this Falcons defense that way. I don't really know how to feel about the Falcons defense after they have quietly been one of the better pass defenses in the NFL this season. Prior to last week, the season high yardage against them was Drake May with 259, and they'd been really good about blitzing and attacking teams up front. But then Bryce Young comes up there and puts up the best performance of his entire career, best by EPA per dropback, 448 passing yards against this Falcons defense. So I'm looking to see if Olave and Tyler Shuck can take advantage of that matchup because, again, theoretically, this is a good spot for Olave because the Falcons use single high coverage on 69% of their dropbacks according to Fantasy Points data. It's by far the highest in the league. Chris Olave on the season, 2.56 yards per route run against single high coverage with 4.04 since Tyler Shuck took over. So this is theoretically a good spot for Olave to show he has that upside that's made him a top 15 wide receiver in points per game this season. Again, rather quietly, I've got him ranked as a fringe wide receiver 1, high end 2 this week. So we will see how it develops here.
Now, this is usually where we let Boone go. But before we do that, we have a request. Somebody's coming on the request hotline specifically for Boone. Here's the question coming at Boone before you get to do any rankings analysis from Ghetto Glory. Says hashtag AskFFL. Big Money Boone, which, by the way, not a bad nickname. Which Jets wide receiver would you start, Mechie or Mitchell?
Oh,
I mean, I think I answered it already, right? It's AD Mitchell all the way, even though I probably have
logged
the
on
ranked
late
above consensus, but AD Mitchell all the way. We know he can do like 95% of the job well. We just need him to figure out that other 5%, and I think the Jets have no choice but to give him chances to do that over and over. And having Tyrod Taylor out there is not necessarily a bad thing for the passing game, right? We should see them have at least a little more success through the air with Tyrod under center, so I'm going with AD Mitchell.
I'm just imagining, like, he sits down with his boss for his year-end review, and it's like, you do 95% of the things really well. We just got to get those other 5% locked in. Boone does 100% of rankings perfectly. He's our ranking expert. We give him a little time now so we can get the final tweaks in before kickoff. He'll be back at it to break down who's moved up or down. So in the meantime, while he does that, let's get to some last-minute pickups. There's still a chance to grab some of these guys off the wire, under 50% roster that can be added before kickoff. Harmon, who you got for me?
I got my eye on Jaguars running back Bashal Tutin, who earlier this week was about 41% roster, which is kind of crazy, man. Like he's a guy that at this point fits the profile of one of these high upside RB2 backups that, listen, if the starter goes down, he is immediately going to rocket up to fantasy football stardom. This is the time of the year. If you have your lineup pretty well set, you're mostly through your bye week gauntlet, you need to start stashing these backup running backs anyways. But I would make the case that Bashal Tutin might be creeping up on Travis Etienne as the number 1 running back in Jacksonville. In the first half of last week's game, Tutin got injured in the second half. That's why it's important to look at this part of the sample here. He owned a 57% share of the team's running back touches. Once again, showed both his explosiveness on those outside zone concepts that this team loves to run under Liam Cohen down there in Jacksonville. But he also showed his effectiveness around the goal line in short yardage once again. So I'm not saying that Travis Etienne is going to completely go away. I think Etienne has been pretty good this season, but Tutin is making this more of a split in a team that is looking to run the ball well in the second half of the season. So for multiple reasons, I think this guy has got to be much higher rostered than sub 50% as he was earlier this week.
All right, so then we got a question in on YouTube. I'll get your thoughts on this one, Harmon. Pick 2. This came from Spencer's Lead 155. It says pick 2 PPR. Aaron Jones, Hunt, Pierce, Myers, Tutin. What do you think?
I think the Pierce thing I'm going to talk about later. I think he's just been so good. You probably have to start him. I think he's in a pretty good spot again in what should be a high scoring game, but I'll talk a little bit more about that matchup later. He's the guy I feel really good about there. Then in terms of Tootin versus a guy like Aaron Jones, I've got them relatively closer ranked, but I just think that Tootin right now is playing at a high level. The offense is, I think, from a rushing perspective, trending in the right direction, where I'm a little bit more skeptical about where Minnesota is overall. So he would be my second pick of that group.
All right, keep the questions coming in. In the meantime, Chris, give me your last minute pickup. What you got?
So I'm looking at the Patriots passing game, and so outside of Stephon Diggs and probably Hunter Henry, who's going to find his way into the end zone because my Bengals give up tight end production to pretty much everybody, I'll look at one of the wide receivers, and this one will be Mac Hollins. Now, I'd feel better about recommending Mac Hollins if Kayshon Boutte was out, but I think it's fair to wonder how much they'll let their deep threat run in his first game back from a hamstring injury. But let's look at Mac Hollins' last couple of weeks without Boutte in the lineup. Hollins was a full-time player, 83 and 84% of the routes with 5 or more targets in both games, but it is something of a double-edged sword with Hollins. I mean, despite the usage over the last couple of weeks, 60% of his targets have come 10 or more air yards down the field, nearly a third at 20 or more air yards down the field. Now, of course, having Drake May as your quarterback, he does have the third highest deep ball completion rate. That should be a positive uptick for a guy like Hollins. But again, going up against the Bengals secondary, I think a lot of folks have started to key in on the lone bright spot for Cincinnati's defense, which is cornerback DJ Turner. I mean, he has been limiting a lot of the perimeter receiver production since he came in for the Bengals so far this year. But Hollins has been moved around quite a bit to both sides of the formation, and Cincinnati's second corner, Cam Taylor-Britt, he's down for the rest of the year with a Lisfranc injury. So there is some opportunity there for Mac Hollins, and in this game where we assume that the Patriots are going to be leading, I would say out of the pass-catching core, if you need somebody to pick up, he is the guy that you would try and look for.
All right, gentlemen, let's move on to checking the chat. This is where we get in and figure out what you guys want answers with on the chat. Shout out to our great producer, Dan Harris, who has started to help me see some of these phonetically because Miami Heat all day, 100. Thank you for typing that in a way I could read that, Dan. Sean Tucker or Judkins, Michael Wilson or Flowers. What say you, Harmon? What do you think?
Okay, so for the running back one, I have Quinshon Judkins ranked higher. I do like Sean Tucker this week, but this is actually a pretty good matchup for Quinshon Judkins. You know, it's a game that should be competitive. The Browns maybe even could, I don't know. I mean, with Shedeur under center, we'll see what happens, but it could be a closer game for sure, and you're not going to get many of those spots with Quinshon Judkins where you feel good about the game script. So I would play him in this one, even though I do like Sean Tucker this week. And then I would Zay Flowers has been kind of I wouldn't say an annoying player in fantasy, but he's just been very steady, like a floor play in fantasy right now. He's not giving you these big games, but he is the guy I would go with, give a slight edge to him over Mike Wilson. I actually literally have these players ranked wide receiver 21 and wide receiver 22. So I give a slight edge to Zay Flowers there with the matchup against that Jets secondary.
We got to keep them challenging for you. All right, the next one comes in from C Keys 82. Boys, another big week for my son. PPR league in need of running back and flex. Brees, Rico, Henderson, Odunze, JJ, Jalen Warren. Please, guys, he needs this one to stay in the pack for the playoffs. Thanks in advance. All right, that's a lot for you, Chris, but I will let you just dissect that like the great surgeon you are.
So let's see. Out of that group, I would say the guys that I would lean away from would be Jalen Warren. He's been nicked up the past couple, at least last week, and we've seen some uptick in production and results for Kenneth Gainwell. So I would lean a bit away from him. And of course, Justin Jefferson having to play with JJ McCarthy and a lot of his errant throws so far. He'd also be a guy that I would say you're probably still starting, but having lower expectations for. The guys that stick out, Rico Dowdle having to play against the 49ers defense, I would say that his opportunity and the matchup lends itself to him. And I'm still going to stick with Travion Henderson for one more week. I mean, a lot of the points that Boone laid out of going up against the Cincinnati defense, I think Harmon and I also laid out a couple of weeks ago, is that even after we saw Henderson kind of break out without Stevenson in the lineup, it's very hard for them to try and put that back in the bottle. And with the way that the Bengals defense has been playing, I would still give Henderson one more week before we try and at least say that he's going to be his committee running back, and we should look for fewer touches and fewer and lesser results for Travion Henderson.
All right, we keep the questions coming in. We're going to keep answering them throughout. You just heard Harmon talk a little bit ago about Pearson. some of the conversation we need to have about that? Well, it's time for Fantasy Feast. Coming up next, we'll take a look, never too early to get your stretchy pants on, and we'll look at some of the matchups that we think people can feast in, especially this Colts one. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Live. I'm Jason Fitz, hanging out with Matt Harmon, hanging out with Chris Allen. We're going to get you ready now for a Fantasy Feast, one of the big matchups of the weekend we've got all eyes on. Chiefs at Colts. Now, don't let the records distract you. The Chiefs, 3.5-point favorite. Over-under on this one, 49.5. So let's take a look at some of these Fantasy Feast opportunities. What do you think, Harmon? What's out there for Fantasy Feast?
Yeah, I'm looking at Alec Pierce versus Michael Pittman in this Colts wide receiver room. Weeks 1 to 6, Michael Pittman led the way in the wide receiver room with a 21% target share. It was Josh Downs second at 19%. Alec Pierce was at 9%. Now, we know he did deal with a concussion early on this season, but from week 7 on, it's been Pierce leading the way at 26%, Michael Pittman 24%, and then Josh Downs at 10%. So while the narrative would probably be, hey, is it Pittman versus Pierce? It's actually seemingly like, what is Josh Downs' role? What is his level of involvement versus Alec Pierce on that outside? And these guys play really different positions. I mean, they play wide receiver, obviously, but the way they play wide receiver is very, very different. They approach the position differently. They win in different ways. So it is sort of a moving target in terms of who's more involved in the offense, while Pittman's role is rather steady as that flanker, the guy who moves around the formation. This week, I do think Pierce is in quietly a little bit of a tougher spot than he is previously, because we've seen when he goes against these single high coverages where it's more one-on-one matchups on the outside, he can really rip it deep. But for these teams that want to limit deep passes with the two high safeties on the field, that's where Pierce can kind of go quiet and the targets can actually funnel more towards Michael Pittman, can funnel more towards Josh Downs. So I think all these guys are still fantasy starters, with Downs being on the lower end from the other two guys, while Pittman's probably the most steady of the two. I just think that it's kind of a week-by-week thing in terms of what matchup dictates. It's also which pocket of the season we're in. So coming out of the bye, don't expect, Alec Pierce to suddenly overtake Michael Pittman in any sort of way. I think Pittman, again, his role is consistent. So just remember that these guys are all players you're starting, but the matchup could be where we level our expectations at for these Colts wide receivers.
I love the way you said level your expectations, because I'm kind of doing the same thing on the opposite side of the ball when it comes to the Kansas City Chiefs offense, because we spend so much time talking about what's wrong with the Kansas City Chiefs offense. Now, I'm going to list some teams for you that are bad. New Orleans, Cleveland, Arizona, Pittsburgh, the Raiders, the Titans, the Bengals. Why am I listing all of those teams? Those are all the teams that are in the same proximity of number of total rushing attempts this year. The Kansas City Chiefs simply aren't establishing any frequency with running the football. And as a result, their offense has become so wildly one-dimensional that it's being defended differently. So now, basically, the only routes that you feel like you got from Mahomes are throw something deep, which hasn't been connecting. And there's nothing else that's really working with any rhythm in that offense. Because they haven't run the football consistently all year, I fear that they won't ever be able to get that running game really on track through the course of the season. Now, I know injury is part of why this has happened, but it doesn't change the fact that Kansas City in this process has made themselves so one-dimensional that they're actually a hell of a lot easier to defend than they have been for the last several years. Until the Chiefs prove to me that they're willing to commit to running the football, I don't trust them to do it. And if I don't trust them to do it, I simply don't trust this offense week in and week out to be reliable for anything. Chris, what do you got in this one?
So kind of dovetailing off of what you were talking about, Fitzy, in terms of this Chiefs offense being one-dimensional, it's not just Patrick Mahomes throwing the football, but who he's throwing the football to. And the receiver that I'm most worried about is Xavier Worthy. And can we trust Xavier Worthy now coming out of the bye? Now, of course, the easy answer for that would be no, because he's coming into this game with an ankle injury, didn't practice on Wednesday, but is up to a full practice by Friday. But even after digging into Worthy's last month of games with Rice back, the answer is still no. I mean, his target rates have oscillated from 20+% against the Commanders and Bills, but he was under 15% against the Raiders and Broncos. His target depth has also shifted from 8 and 6 air yards to up to 17.7 and 13 air yards per attempt over the last 2 weeks. My knee-jerk reaction is there's something similar to like what happened with Jameson Williams over the first month to 2 months of the season before Dan Campbell took over play calling, where they needed to find out what are the optimal route combinations that are both he's comfortable with and also what Patrick Mahomes can really do within this offense. I mean, we just saw Xavier Worthy go from being used on a bunch of in-breakers and crossing routes to now over the past couple weeks, it's been more out-breakers, go routes. And now, of course, it doesn't help that Mahomes has a lower deep ball completion rate than Cam Ward and Davis Mills. I mean, it also doesn't help that the Colts secondary has added talent like Sauce Gardner. They're getting healthier with Travarius Ward coming off of IR. And I mean, from a narrative standpoint, my old defensive coordinator, Big Lou, that's over in the Colts with the Colts right now, has at least been able to find out what makes Mahomes tick and limit some of that offensive production from him in the past. So I think it's a larger concern about Worthy's role within the passing game, I mean, which calls into question essentially his ability to feast on this matchup with the third highest total on the weekend.
All right, gentlemen, let's grab our guitars and our hats, pull them down, and sing some blues. It's time for the bye week blues. There are 4 teams on the bye this week. That would be Denver, the Chargers, Miami, and Washington. So with the bye week blues out there, Matt, Harmon, who do you got in mind that you want to maybe find a spot start for?
Yeah, anybody who played Jared Goff last weekend was definitely singing the blues, as Jared Goff had the worst game of his career, certainly the worst game with the Detroit Lions ever since he arrived in Detroit. That was the worst game from a success rate, EPA per dropback, all of that. It was also the lowest completion percentage of his entire career at 37%. But I think this week it's going to feel gross to go from, all right, I'm starting a guy who completed 37% of his passes to making him somebody that is a QB1 this week. But I think it's real. I think he can be a QB1 for you this week. I think he is a very viable replacement. If you don't have your starting quarterback, you got injuries at that spot, you go ahead and plug in Jared Goff, because this is the complete opposite type of matchup is what we got last week. Number one, it's back home. Boone has talked about this consistently. Jared Goff's splits versus indoor games versus outdoor games, it's very stark. He's back home. He's in the Dome. He's in Detroit. And he gets a matchup with the Giants secondary that is very vulnerable, especially on the one-on-one matchups. Jameson Williams has really turned it on lately. Amon-Ra St. Brown is obviously going to bounce back from a 2-catch, 12-target performance last week. So I'm very confident that Goff can be a bye-week replacement for you, a QB1 in this given week.
All right, Chris, what do you got for the bye-week blues?
So I'll give 2 quick ones real quick at the running back position. The first one will be Sean Tucker, running back for the Bucks. And now last week we saw Tucker take on 59% of the rushing attempts with a couple of targets and finish as the overall RB1 in week 11. Now it wasn't just the explosive plays buoying his results. I mean, Tucker averaged 4.58 adjusted yards after contact per attempt with a 15.8% forced missed tackle rate. And both of those metrics were better than 4 of or all 5 of Rachaad White's games as the starter with Bucky Irving out. I mean, insider reports already hinted at more work for Tucker going up against this Rams defense. But, I mean, LA has only allowed one 100-yard rusher all season and just 2 rushing scores all year. So we're getting the volume, but the efficiency might be a little less for Tucker. And the other guy that I wanted to mention, it's Tajay Spears for the Titans. Now, heading into the Titans bye, I mean, Spears had back-to-back games with 15% of the targets, and he's also been the preferred option in the 2-minute drill. And now the Seahawks, they have allowed the 6th fewest yards to running backs over their last 6 games, but they've given up over 4 receptions per game to the position. So we're walking into this game where the Titans will be, with Ward having fewer passing options, with Calvin Ridley and Alec Ayomaner both out. So it's safe to assume they'll be playing from behind given the spread for this game. So if Ward is looking for some additional options in the receiving game, I would say Spears is the one to benefit for some of that versus any of the other guys that are currently on the roster.
All right, Harmon, give me one more that you got your eyes on for the bye week Blues.
Yeah, I'll go to the wide receiver position here, talk about Jacoby Myers, who rather predictably saw a bump in his route percentage from his first game at 50% with the Jacksonville Jaguars to 83% in his second game with the team. He was targeted on 30% of his routes. You just saw immediately what a good fit he is with Trevor Lawrence and how much he was needed in this passing attack. We've talked ad nauseum, or I feel like I have certainly talked about it ad nauseum all season long, the issues that the Jacksonville Jaguars wide receivers have had going over the middle of the field, winning consistently against zone coverage, catching the football cleanly over the middle when contact is approaching. Jacoby Myers, that's just what he does, man. Like he's got really reliable hands. He goes over the middle of the field. He played more outside than inside in week 2. He's a guy who can play all 3 receiver positions credibly. This is an offense that wants to move its wideouts around. Myers is a huge, huge boost to a room that has been ravaged with injuries and obviously has gotten a little bit of a disappointing season from Brian Thomas Jr. overall. So we'll see what happens when BTJ gets back, but with no BTJ in this game here, I think we just can lock in Jacoby Myers as a rock-solid fantasy football start in a good matchup against the Arizona Cardinals. I expect him to lead the team in targets this week.
Well, like the little brother you always wanted to beat up, I'll run into the room and say, oh, yeah, Alfred wants to know, half PPR, Myers, Luther, or Wandale needs upside. Myers, Luther, or Wandale, you still buying it in that situation, Harmon?
Yeah, I mean, upside, I don't know, but I do think he is the safest projection by a considerable amount among those guys. So, yeah, I feel really good about Jacoby Myers there.
Oh, look at that. See, flawless execution by you. All right, gentlemen, you guys get to grab some Gatorade now. Maybe grab some turkey and gravy, whatever it is that you want to sip on while we take a second here. We bring Boone back in to break some ranks. Boone comes flying down the hallway with all sorts of rankings, updates. What do you got for us, brother?
Yeah, I'm picturing just papers flying everywhere. I got a pencil over my ear, all that sort of stuff. Emmanuel Wilson, we got to talk about him, right? We mentioned it off the top. Josh Jacobs out. I got Emmanuel Wilson up to RB16, but I'm going to be honest, I'm still trying to find ways to move him up even further. Regardless, he's a very strong high-end RB2 for fantasy this week. Last week, when Josh Jacobs went out, it was Wilson that took over the vast majority of the work in that backfield. They also have Chris Brooks. I don't think Chris Brooks is going to get that much work in this game, so it looks like this is going to be Wilson's backfield. And last week, 49 yards and a touchdown on 12 touches. If we bump that up, it could be a very solid fantasy day. The matchup with the Vikings isn't the best, but the Packers want to run the ball. They want to stay balanced. They're going to put the ball in his belly and give him a lot of opportunities today. So you're starting him with a ton of confidence in fantasy this week. Second guy I want to mention here, DK Metcalf. I have him up to wide receiver 22. I have moved him up a little bit, and that's not necessarily a knock on Aaron Rodgers, but an injured Aaron Rodgers going into this game might have been a little bit concerning. I'm not that high on Mason Rudolph by any means, but what we do have to account for is this Bears defense. Before this game, they were giving up the 4th most fantasy points to receivers. And then you look at all the injuries they have, Fitz. I mean, you could just go over it in the secondary. Jalen Johnson, Kyler Gordon, they're not going to play in this game. The linebackers, TJ Edwards, Noah Sewell, Tremaine Edmonds is on IR. Just so many injuries across this defense that I think the Steelers are going to have a ton of success on offense in this game. I think DK Metcalf against a banged up Bears defense is going to be able to go out there even though he doesn't have Aaron Rodgers. So looking at him as a pretty solid wide receiver 2 for fantasy. And then the last one isn't really based on any news that came down this morning, but it's just one I want to make sure people are aware of. Jake Ferguson down to tight end 10. And based on what he's done this year, I think a lot of people would look at that and be stunned that I'm putting him that low in the rankings, because I think the public perception is that he's more of like a top 5 fantasy tight end. And yet a lot of those stats for him were based on what he did early in the season. He was getting a ton of volume. We had CeeDee Lamb missing games. He was picking up a lot of the slack there. Now with Lamb healthy, with Pickens healthy, with those guys just absolutely going off on the outside, Ferguson's numbers have started to dwindle a little bit here, right? He averaged 8 receptions, 54 yards, nearly 10 targets per game over those first 5. Since then, it's fallen to 4 catches, 26 yards, and just 5 targets per contest in his last 5 outings. You look at what he did last time out, just 16 yards, but if you look at his fantasy points, it was okay because he saved it with a touchdown. I think that's the kind of player he is for fantasy now, which bumps him out of that like high-end group, puts him down more as like a low-end, kind of touchdown-dependent fantasy tight end. He still could be a top 12 guy, but he's in the mix with like so many other options. And if you can, I would go look at some of the potential streamers that are out there. There's lots of guys on the waiver wire, and just consider whether you like their matchups and whether you like them a little bit better, because I certainly have at least 1 or 2 of those guys above Ferguson this week.
All right, let's bring the boys back together, and we will now run some hurry-up offense. 25 seconds up on the clock. We continue to give these spectacular Thanksgiving fall graphics, by the way. With the foliage in the air, the first question comes from S. Gars. It says, standard flex, Etienne, Charbonnet, or Tucker. Matt Harmon, what say you?
Ooh, yeah, I really do like Sean Tucker this week, so I kind of hate to keep picking against him, but I'm going to go with Travis Etienne on this one. As much as I like Basil Tootin in this backfield right now, I still think Etienne is playing well, and I just think Liam Cohen right now wants to lean on that ground game to maybe take some of the pressure off Lawrence.
All right, the next question comes from Ian Roberts. This one will go to Chris. Chris Allen, the question is Swift, Junkins, or Jones Sr.? What say you, good sir?
Ooh, out of that group, it's probably either of the first 2. And I'll go DeAndre Swift. I think from a volume standpoint, we have seen less of Kyle Monangai over these past few weeks. So from an opportunity standpoint, I think he probably grades us as the better of those 3. And also the matchup also lends itself to some more production from the running back position. So I'll go Swift.
All right, Boone, you get the next one. The next one comes from Eric Hernandez, and Eric Hernandez says, W.D. Robinson, not sure, like you had the room to write Wandale. I don't. W.D. Robinson, Junkins, or Judy. Unnecessary abbreviation. That's a foul, but we'll still let Boone go ahead and answer this. What do you got?
W.D. Robinson sounds like a famous author or something. It doesn't necessarily
Right.
sound like a fantasy receiver that you're going to want to play. Jerry Jeudy, not even in this conversation in my mind. We just don't know what that passing attack is going to look like with Shooter. Maybe he ends up having a great game. I'm not really banking on that. So I'm going to look at Robinson. I think he's the play this week for sure. What's going to be a shootout with Jameis Winston under center.
WD for the win. All right. Maybe he puts a 40. WD 40. See what I did there? All right. The last one, Cousin It. Hey there, Ask FFL. Ask FFL. Dobbs or Watson in full PPR? Harmon, what do you think?
Oh, no way I'm going to get this right, but I do think that Watson right now is just trending up a little bit higher than Romeo Dobbs. Anytime you think there's clarity in the wide receiver room in Green Bay, there's not. I get it. So probably not going to be right here, but Christian Watson is the guy we'll have ranked a little bit higher this week than Romeo Dobbs.
That was the fantasy football equivalent of a quarterback throwing a wide receiver right to his immediate death in the middle of the field, and the receiver being like, "Nah, I'm good. That's a pass for me, dog." I blame myself. All right, coming up next, we're going to take a look at some fantasy face-offs. We're going to take a look at how we handle Chris Godwin. That's coming up next on Ask FFL. We'll figure out what to do. Look who's back again. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Live here on Yahoo Sports. I'm Jason Fitz, hanging out with Matt Harmon, Chris Allen, Justin Boone, all the way up to 1 p.m. Eastern. We'll get you caught up on everything you need to know. Plus, our very own Scott Pianowski has just settled in with his today. I think it's hot apple cider. He's got hot apple cider and some snacks, and he's ready for everybody on Twitter X, where you can get your questions. Ask FFL. I don't know what the right snack is to go with hot apple cider, but if you get to Twitter X and you just use hashtag Ask FFL, Scott will get all of your questions answered while he sits back in a robe and comfy. We're going to keep locking this thing in. We'll start with some matchup-proof players for Week 12. Boom. Who you got for me that is absolutely locked in?
I'm surprised I'm saying this, but I think DeAndre Swift against the Steelers is a great play this week. And the touchdowns haven't really been there the last couple of games for him, but at least 90 scrimmage yards in both of those contests. Chris mentioned earlier, like the Kyle Monungai thing, he's kind of taken a bit of a step back. They really like Swift in that backfield. 90-plus scrimmage yards, not only in those last 2 games, but in 4 of his last 5 outings as well. So he's a very solid RB2. He has that RB1 upside when he does get into the end zone, but the reason that I bring him up here is because I think a lot of people look at that Steelers defense and, you know, when that Jonathan Taylor game happened and they kind of shut him down and they kind of shut that Colts offense down, people started to think like, okay, maybe the Steelers defense is back and they're really good against the run. But it's not really the case. I mean, they're allowing just the 7th fewest fantasy points to running backs. So that matchup is like in the red when you look at it. But when you actually pay attention to what they've done lately, 127 yards and 6 receptions to Chase Brown last week. Kamani Vidal went for 108 and a touchdown in week 10. So they definitely are a defense that you can get over against as a running back. I think this is a spot where we definitely could see Swift have a pretty strong game, even though on paper it looks like he won't.
All right, Harmon, who do you have that's locked in matchup proof?
Yeah, I'll stick at the running back position, kind of go along the same theme as Boone there with Chase Brown, the Bengals running back, going against the Patriots defense that has just shut down a ton of running games all season long. And it just doesn't really matter for Sean Tucker, to be quite honest. Like I said, this is for Chase Brown here. Sean Tucker actually, I think, still has the highest rushing yards against the Patriots defense all season with 59, but we're not playing Chase Brown for the rushing production. He's gotten some of it the last few months, which has been nice after a slow start of the season, but really it's all about the passing game role here that I think is going to be able to save Chase Brown if you're starting him in fantasy. 4th in targets per game with no Jamar Chase in the lineup this week. I think that increases the target projection for Chase Brown. So despite the tough run game matchup against the Patriots, I still think you're playing him as a high-end RB2 at worst in fantasy.
Too much running back love here. Chris, give me somebody that's not a running back that you're locking in. Way too much running back love here.
Way too much, but I'll take any Bengals love for today. I need all the optimism that I could possibly get for watching Cincinnati here in a few hours, or a couple hours rather. But still, let's look at the wide receiver position. Jameson Williams, we're locking him into our rosters. I mean, whatever's going on with Detroit's play calling, it's clearly helping Jameson Williams in terms of leveraging his speed to the best of his ability. Because through 9 weeks, Williams was targeted when running in-breaking routes at about 40% of the time. I'm talking digs, crossers, post routes, and he averaged about 7.1 yards after the catch with around a 64% success rate on those attempts. Last 2 weeks, with Dan Campbell calling the plays, he's up to a 64% route rate on those concepts. His yak per reception up nearly 3 yards to 9.9, and also his success rate around 78%. I mean, he's been at a 21% target rate over the last 2 weeks. Sam Laporta is out of the lineup right now because he's down with the back injury. And of course, they're back at home playing against a Giants defense that should be without Paulson Adebo. And also Deontay Banks is coming into this game questionable. So if you've got JMO, he should be locked into your starting roster for sure.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to let Matt and Chris take over. They'll do some fantasy face-off for us while the rest of us lounge for a moment. What do you got, boys?
All right, Chris, let's do a little fantasy face-off here with Chris Godwin coming back to play after a long absence with that fibula injury. He is expected to play against the Los Angeles Rams this week, so not exactly a great matchup for him to return either. That Rams defense is playing really well lately, but let's put him up against 3 wide receivers that I think people will be struggling with what to do with them this week, starting with Xavier Worthy, who you talked about a little bit earlier. Would you rather play Chris Godwin or Xavier Worthy this week?
Okay, so I'm going to go with Worthy here. And I know I know. After casting doubt on Worthy earlier, it sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but I'm looking at the lesser of two evils in a sense, because in Godwin's only fully healthy game back in week 4, he played from the slot on 29.1% of his snaps, and PFF had him at around like a 61-62% slot rate just last season. So the way I'm looking at it is that we're trying to find out like what is his role going to be now with Emeka Egbuka playing in, Sterling Shepard also mixing in. So this could be a little bit of redundancy in terms of who's really getting some of those slot snaps. So now if I'm going to be looking at a wide receiver that's going to be having their role adjusted, I'd rather go with the guy catching passes from, or at least trying to catch passes from, Patrick Mahomes versus Baker Mayfield. At least that's how I'm looking at it for this week.
I think I'll actually go on the other side here and take Chris Godwin. Look, to be clear, I love Chris Godwin, but he is a guy that I've mostly considered to be a 2026 option. I kind of always thought this 2025 season for him coming back from a major injury would be a lost season just with how the reporting was in the offseason. Also felt that way with Brandon Ayuk, which what a weekend of news it was for the 49ers wide receiver. Total sidebar there. But with Chris Godwin, I do think in this matchup, he can probably still return to a higher target projection than what you're going to get with Xavier Worthy. I'm really worried about Worthy in this matchup against the Colts secondary that plays man coverage on 50% of their third and fourth down plays under Lou Anarumo. And I think that number could jack up actually this week, especially with Sauce Gardner and Travarius Ward back in the lineup. And Worthy just really struggles with man coverage. The Chiefs as a whole struggle with man coverage this year. So this one, I think I'll actually go with Chris Godwin, even though I don't feel super comfortable with it. I mentioned the 49ers. We're not going to talk Ayuk, obviously, but let's talk about Ricky Pearsall here. Would you rather play Ricky Pearsall coming off a 0-yardage game last week in his return from injury, or Chris Godwin coming off an injury? What a great couple of options that setup was, Chris.
I know, exactly. And that's where I would tend to lean a bit more towards Chris Godwin for kind of the points that you were laying out, because I'll talk a bit more about Ricky Pearsall in a bit, but I do wonder if it'll take Pearsall take him a bit more time to get back into the rhythm of the offense. Whereas Godwin earlier in the season, he came right back to a 26% target rate. And so like I was saying earlier, despite the potential redundancy with Godwin, Egbuka, Shepard, Baker went right back to Chris Godwin because we know that they have that level of rapport based off of the last season. So if we already saw a situation where Godwin went right back to the top of the wide receiver pecking order, of course he'll need some help if he wants, and of course that this is a team that's going to need some help to keep up with the Rams offense. I'll go with Chris Godwin here.
Yeah, we're going to continue the trend of not being helpful because I'm going to take the other side of this one, and I will say Ricky Pearsall on this one because I think last week was the week where he got ramped up in terms of he was a full go. Kyle Shanahan talked about this. He was a full go in terms of playing all of the snaps, but he wasn't really involved in the game plan on kind of an intentional basis. You saw him running a lot of clear out routes. He is going to be a little bit, I think, boom or bust from a fantasy standpoint because he's running all these vertical routes. He's their vertical slot option. He's running the most difficult routes on the team. It's actually not too dissimilar to how Ayuk was when he was really popping off in that 2022 to 2023 season where Debo and George Kittle and CMC got all the fun, easy stuff around the line of scrimmage, and then Ayuk was running the harder routes down the field, which made him a bit more of a ceiling versus floor type of option. I think Pearsall will be that way, but in this matchup that I actually think could get rather high scoring between the Panthers and 49ers, I'll pick Ricky Pearsall on the other side of this to have the bigger game in his second week off of an injury. Let's wrap it up here with a guy who doesn't have any injury designation, but is playing with J.J. McCarthy as his quarterback. That is Jordan Addison, who had the ultimate touchdown deodorant game last week from a real bad perspective with the Vikings passing offense. But now they got the Green Bay Packers on the other side of it here, Chris. Who are we playing this week, Chris Godwin or Jordan Addison?
I'm assuming we're going to agree on this one, but I'm going to go with Chris Godwin here because we now have a 3-game sample with 9 back under center for the Vikings, and Addison probably has about the same number of catchable targets over that same span. And also the reason that I do have some concerns about Jordan Addison, he's averaging 18.8 air yards per target over this stretch with JJ McCarthy back under center. 41% of the balls thrown his way have been off target. So while he's earned 23% of the targets from McCarthy, and of course, like you just mentioned, he scored a touchdown last week, he was still just wide receiver 30 on the week. Besides, JJ McCarthy versus Micah Parsons, it sounds like a lopsided fight anyway, so I'd rather go with Chris Godwin here.
Look at how close those projections were. That was crazy. In terms of 4 catches, 47 yards for Godwin, 4 for 46 for Jordan Addison. Yeah, I'll give the 1 yard advantage to Chris Godwin here. I will agree with you on this one. I think I'd play Chris Godwin over Jordan Addison. Just really not buying what that Vikings passing offense is right now. And it is risky with Chris Godwin coming off an injury. I totally recognize that. This could absolutely blow up in our face, but there's a lot of familiarity between Baker and Chris Godwin. I actually think Godwin coming back could really settle a wide receiver room that's been very up and down. Emeka Egbuka's performance has been very up and down. So I'm with you that Chris Godwin is the guy I would take here in a matchup that I expect to be a little bit more high scoring, that Packers-Vikings tilt. All right, let's throw it back to Fitz and Boone and help some people with their lineups out there.
All right, guys, great job by you. It's time for to make your pick, where we'll help people figure out some of these questions they've got out there. Boom. We'll start with my favorite user ever in history for us. He's famous on this show. Some might call him Rebellion. Some might call him Rebel Lion. I prefer Rebel Lion. He's back, baby. Flex 2. Yoshivas, Judy, Slayton, Pitts. What do you got for me?
That one, we got him. There we go. All came up. I was going to say it went away too quick for me to even see them. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but it's going to be Kyle Pitts. Like, with Drake London out, they need to find other guys to throw to. I'm not convinced that Darnell Mooney is going to be the guy there. So I think you're going with Pitts as the option. Although I would listen to an argument for Andre Yoshivas, because I think he also is going to be in a spot where they're going to be missing their top receiver and he's going to get some more opportunities. But rankings wise, the choice is Pitts. My head says Pitts, my heart says Yoshivas. Let's put it that way.
What I know is that if FFL ever forms a Steel Panther like 80s cover band, it is going to be called Rebel Lion. I don't know who's doing what in the band. I just know we're called Rebel Lion, and no, Rebel Lion can't get any of the money from it. Josh with the next question, hashtag make your pick. He asks, Michael Wilson, Sean Tucker, ETN. Again, bit of a foul here. You had the room to spell it. Or Tootin, 2 spots available. What do you got for me?
So Michael Wilson, definitely. He's got another great matchup this week. You know, when reporters were asking the coaches about, him having the huge game last week and whether he could repeat it, the idea is no, he's probably not going to. But the joke was, hey, he might do it in this game because the matchup with the Jags is still a great one. And we know that Marvin Harrison Jr. isn't around. So expecting him to be a top 20 fantasy receiver this week. That's where I have him ranked. And then you're kind of flipping a coin between Etienne and Tootin. I'm still going to play Travis Etienne for now until we see the takeover actually happen, until we see it turn into a 50-50 committee or get very, very close. I'm still going to play Travis Etienne. The good news is that in that matchup, I think both those guys can get home today. So you're playing Etienne. We'll see how it turns out. But I think that the Tootin season is coming. It's coming soon, and it's going to end the season with him being the better back in that backfield in my mind.
All right, the next one comes from Anthony Johnson. All right, Anthony Johnson asks, Trey Tucker, E. Wilson, league it for flex, and Love or McCarthy for super flex position. What do you think?
I feel like this one is pretty straightforward, and I know it's probably going to feel weird to take both Packers guys, but I think you're going all in on the Packers. The matchup isn't great with the Vikings. It's a very strong defense that Brian Flores has there, but I talked about Wilson earlier, stepping into that lead back role. I expect him to get a ton of work. And then for me, you just trust Love over McCarthy. McCarthy is such a wild card play at this point. You don't know what he's going to do. I'm worried about him every single week, even though he has the tools to put up good fantasy days. So I'll take Love, who I think is the safer play in this one.
All right, I hear the caution in your voice. Coming up next, we'll have a little bit of caution in our voice while we try and figure out what's wrong with one of our favorite players this year in fantasy football. What's wrong with the Mecca? We'll break it down next. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Live. I'm Jason Fitz, hanging out with Matt Sal and Justin Boone. We've got a massive Sunday night football matchup for you. This week's game of the week in the century. We have several of them, but one of the big games, obviously, the Buccaneers taking on the Rams. Heavy line on the 7 points, over under 49.5. This game in Inglewood tonight, 8:20 p.m. So let's talk about some of these matchups. Chris, what do you have your eye on in this game particularly?
So for me, I'm looking at, is Matthew Stafford really have the case to be the MVP for this season? And I checked a couple of sports books just last night, and Stafford is the front runner, and he for 3/4 of the way through the regular season. I mean, but do the results really and stats, do they match the hype? I mean, well, he's got 2 easy checkbox already marked off. I mean, he's a quarterback. Sorry, Jonathan Taylor. And his team is at least on the path to the 1 seed. Plus, he's also got a case based on some of the other metrics. Looking at 4 of the last 5 MVPs, they've averaged 0.2 EPA per dropback or better. Stafford's currently sitting at 0.17, which is 5th amongst all quarterbacks. Stafford's 255 passing yards per game also falls in line with his potential predecessors. I mean, but since Stafford doesn't add anything with his legs, I mean, his value, in the MVP conversation has to come from passing. But the Rams quarterback, leads the league in touchdown passes. He's 6 full scores ahead of the next best quarterback. Right now he's averaging 2.7 throwing scores per game. He's essentially the Jonathan Taylor of quarterbacks in terms of how often he's getting his receivers into the end zone. Looking at the guys that have gotten the same award in the past, whether it was Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, they're averaging just over 2 per game. So Stafford also falls in line with that. Did Stafford need a phantom holding call in the end zone and an alien at D tackle to get him a Super Bowl? Absolutely. And no, I'm not bitter about any of that at all. But with the way he's playing right now, he does have a legitimate shot at taking down the league's best award as of right now. So I do think he has a decent chance at being the MVP by the end of the season.
All right, we're going to figure out how to virtually give Chris Allen a long-distance hug while he gets through that. Working through a trauma dump there. Boone, give me what you got your eyes on for in this matchup.
Well, maybe there could be somebody else coming on here who could actually help Stafford get that MVP award. I'm wondering, is Terrence Ferguson's season here? Because Tyler Higbee has been placed on IR, and this team has basically used 4 tight ends all year, right? It's been Higbee, it's been Colby Parkinson, Davis Allen, and then Ferguson. And now that Higbee's out of the way, that's going to drop down to these 3 guys. And I think the player who is going to benefit the most is definitely Ferguson. And we've talked a bunch about how this offense is used more 13 personnel. They get a bunch of tight ends involved, right? Why not get your 2nd-round rookie who is a really good all-around talent, has great pass catching skills. He's been out there about 30% of the snaps, and even in that role, we've seen him flash at times. He had a 31-yard touchdown in week 7, 54 yards in week 9. So I'm looking at Ferguson as a player who we could see come on. Fantasy-wise, you don't need to rush out and grab him and put him in your lineup this week. This is more a player that we're going to stash and see if he can become something. But we know the kind of volume the receivers get. We know the kind of attention the Rams receivers draw. Why not have their 2nd-round rookie get a bigger role and start to come on down the stretch? And I think if we consolidate the Higbee and what we've seen from Ferguson, it could be decent stats where we start to consider him as a streamer and maybe even more down the stretch.
All right, Harmon, what do you got your eyes on?
Yeah, you asked the question before the last commercial break, Fitz. Why has Emeka Egbuka slowed down? Let's talk about it here. So we know that Emeka Egbuka at the beginning of the season was one of the best wide receivers in the NFL from a production standpoint. He was a wide receiver 1 in fantasy. He was looking like a slam dunk pick. On the season, he still has been a slam dunk pick, but we know the last few weeks, we're showing it on the screen here right now, since week 6, it's been a much more volatile performance here for Emeka Egbuka. Since week 7, Emeka Egbuka is wide receiver 30 in points per game. His teammate, fellow rookie, 7th rounder, wide receiver Tez Johnson, is actually 1 spot ahead of him as wide receiver 29. And he has 43 targets in this span of games, does Emeka Egbuka, which is tied for 6th most among wide receivers with Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's right ahead of Drake London, who has been one of the best wide receivers in the NFL during this span from a production standpoint. So what's going on here? What's happening? Well, number one, it's just a little bit of simple variance. This happens at the wide receiver position all the time. There are pockets of the season where the guy is dominant. There's pockets of the season where he slows down. And then sometimes he can pick it up again by the end of the year. And sometimes that pattern is completely all over the place in terms of production. This just happens at wide receiver. There is volatility. But from this specific standpoint, we've seen Emeka Egbuka start off incredible and then get the defensive attention that an incredible wide receiver typically gets. You don't see this all the time with rookies, but he's getting true like double teams. He's getting safeties shaded over the top of him. They're trying to limit him because I just don't think teams are scared by the other guys in this wide receiver room right now. Sterling Shepard, Tez Johnson. I think they're nice role players, but I don't think they command the respect from defenses that other guys do across the league. So Chris Godwin coming back actually could be like a twofold help to Emeka Egbuka. One, it's just another guy to think about. Two, it's a player that we saw, Chris mentioned this earlier, actually line up a lot outside in his return to action, which allowed Emeka Egbuka to move around a little bit. He's only playing in the slot on about a third of his snaps, and actually lower than that in this span since week 7. So that makes it easier for defenses to try to take him away. So if there's any panic in the streets about Emeka Egbuka, I would be buying his stock. Obviously, the trade deadline in fantasy has passed at this point, but just from a general standpoint, I'd be buying that he actually impresses in the back half of the year, because I think other guys coming back to this room like Chris Godwin can help him in terms of defensive attention, which should allow him to get back to some of those big games that we saw earlier in the season. I'm not too concerned about him as a player going forward.
All right, speaking of the panic button, let's get to primetime picks. You know the drill. We go through a snake draft on 3 different important games over the weekend, the primetime ones and one other. We go through this process. What do I got? Oh, sure looks like I won again last week. Ever since the zebra costume, things on this entire contest have shifted greatly. Woo! Justin Boone still in first place, but boy, I'm swaggy walking my way right up to second place. Feeling good on this, Chris. You do know what we're trying to accomplish right here, right? Like I just want to. Okay. That's all. All right. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna pick between these 3 games: Philadelphia and Dallas, Tampa Bay and the Rams. We just talked about that. We'll see what we think on that. And then Carolina, San Francisco. And as was last week, the order has not changed. So, Chris Allen, you are picking first, my friend. What do you got for us?
Well, my picks are actually scoring touchdowns as of last week, so or at least moving in the right direction. So I'll go with Puka Nacua for this game, or for starting off these picks. I mean, the amount of targets and also the matchup going up against the Bucs secondary should be one to at least give me some more points for this week. I'll probably score as many points from Puka as I have from the rest of my team over the past few weeks. We'll go Puka.
All right, that means Harmon, you are up second. What do you got for us?
Yeah, I think I'm getting a steal here. Christian McCaffrey at the second pick. He's been incredible this year. He's playing his Carolina Panthers that he used to play for. So I'll go Christian McCaffrey here and hope he catches a bunch of passes so I can actually, I don't know, do something useful in this stupid contest.
You're disdain. Like, look, I've got. So this was a tough decision for me, but I also decide that, hey, I'm comfortable getting either of the Cowboys wide receivers, and I know that Boone's going to take one of them, and I'll just take the other. So my indecision forces me instead to I'm going to wait on that one. And that means that I want to get somebody out of this Carolina-San Francisco game that I feel good about. So I go up to the podium with Rico Dowdle. It's close between Rico and Tet. But I go Rico here, and I feel pretty good about it, which means, Boone, that you got the turn. What do you got for me?
I'm sick of you picking right in front of me and sniping me every week. But at the same token, I don't want you to be picking last. I don't want to be picking ahead of you. I want to keep this final spot here. I'm going to go with CeeDee Lamb. Just best player available there. Don't love the matchup, but we saw him get home against them in the first game, so hopefully he can do it again, even though that Eagles defense is much better now. And then I'll go with Teteroa McMillan. We saw them change the way that they used him last week, moving him around more. I think that's going to continue. They had a ton of success, and the matchup with the 49ers, the way to get after them is through the air right now, so I think he's going to follow it up with another big game.
Yeah, that makes me nervous. I'm not sure I feel good about Rico over Tet. I don't know. But I do feel like I was going to take either of the Cowboys wide receivers, so I quickly run up to the podium here again and say I'll just take George Pickens, which has become a tradition for me in this game. I feel like I take a lot of George Pickens. I feel like I'm the head of the George Pickens street team, so let's see if he can help me get through this one again. Harmon, you're back on the board. And, again, for like the third straight week, you can't complain about having to wait all the way back to the top of the draft, so this should be good.
Me complain never. I'll take Saquon Barkley here. You mentioned earlier, Fitz, that maybe that what we saw on Monday night was a little bit of a mirage against your Raiders with this Cowboys defense, but I think they can. An improvement for them would be below average. Like, can this be a below average defense instead of some of the worst in the league? I think that's what we're looking at from this Cowboys defense. So Saquon Barkley can still get home against that type of matchup.
2 straight picks now for you, Chris. What do you got for us first?
So I'll look at the receiving game for the Eagles, and I know it didn't turn out so well for them in their first matchup, but with the way that Devonta Smith has been playing, I would say that the way that his rapport with Hurts shapes up for this matchup, I'll give it to him for this one. So I'll go Devonta Smith, and then seeing George Kittle back creating explosive plays on a more consistent basis, I'll look at him as my final pick going up against the Panthers defense.
Which means, Harmon, you are back on the board. What do you got for me?
Yeah, not that my mouth should be worth anything considering where I rank in this contest, but I'll go ahead and put my money where my mouth is here, and I'll take Emeka Egbuka after all I was talking about in the last segment. 43 targets, 18 catches. Come on, that's gonna course correct here. Big game coming for Egbuka.
Well, that leaves me with another 50-50 ball. I feel like that's where I've been this whole contest, so I just flipped the coin, literally, and I came up Kyren Williams. So I'll take Kyren Williams out of this one and send it to Boone.
Yeah, I feel like our teams fits. It's just like a little dance we're doing here, picking players from the same game back and forth. And you've left me with Devontae Adams. There's 3 players left from that game, 1, 2, and now the third guy left is Devontae Adams. So I'll take him here.
Look at this, Harmon. Are you feeling okay over there, Harmon? Like, it's still within reach, buddy. You could go on a run. You could be the Kansas City Chiefs here, like a little run, and then all of a sudden
let's just go to the next segment. Okay. Let's just help the people out. Let's get to the next segment.
No one is mathematically eliminated.
That is, I just know the zebra outfit is still undefeated. And the zebra outfit, it might be an annual tradition now. All right, hurry up offense. 25 seconds on the clock. We'll get some questions in here. We'll see how we feel about it. ARB1968 said, just traded for Breece Hall last night. What's his upside for the rest of the season? Harmon, what say you?
I think his upside is aight. Like it probably won't be crazy good. It probably won't be crazy bad. I think his upside is aight. I mean, it's probably might catch a few more checkdowns with Tyrod Taylor under center. I don't really have a strong take on Breece Hall. I think his strongest take is that he probably wanted to be traded at the NFL trade deadline. So, I think his upside will be aight.
I just love the idea of Harmon being a reviewer of everything. It's like, it's fine. The next question comes from Dominic Borselli. Half PPR, need a wide receiver, Dobbs or Booty, because Jamar Chase can't stop spitting on people. This one's got to go to Chris Allen, obviously. So what do you think, buddy?
Like I was pointing out earlier, Booty coming back and how he's used on the field. I mean, will the Patriots really try and let him stretch that hamstring out for some of those deep shots when they've got Demario Douglas, they've got Mac Hollins. So I would say I would give the props to Dobbs for this one. And of course, and honestly, the routes that he runs, they have been something of a bugaboo for the Vikings secondary. So I'll take Dobbs in this one, even though, like to Harmon's point earlier, it'll probably wind up being Christian Watson for another 2 scores.
All right, so the next question comes in from Nelly Fields, 8039. Nelly Fields says, please, please, please help. I'm hurt at quarterback. Should I start Shuck, Winston, or Young? Please, Boone, what do you think?
This is the ultimate coin flip. I have them all ranked very close. I would actually go with Young because, like I said earlier, the 49ers, you can throw against them. We saw him have success with them using McMillan in a different way last week. And if anything, you get to wait until Monday night, so you'll still have a chance going into Monday night. Then you can watch the Monday Nighter and watch all your hopes fall apart then.
Speaking of Monday Night Football, coming up next, we've got a doozy. 49ers, Panthers. The question, is Brock really back? We'll figure out what it means for San Francisco on the other side. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Live. We got Matt Harmon, Chris Allen, Justin Boone. I'm Jason Fitz. We're with you all the way up to 1 p.m. Eastern. Get you everything you need to know for today so that you can go out there and kick the snot out of all of your friends and trash talk them belligerently the entire day. That's the goals here. We got goals here. Let's take a look at the Monday Night Football matchup. It is a big one between the Panthers and the 49ers. The 49ers a heavy favorite at 7.5 in this. 49.5 is the over-under for this game at San Francisco. What do you got eye on in this one, Boone?
I think Brock Purdy is a really sneaky fantasy quarterback the rest of the way. I think he's a top 10 guy, maybe even better. And you look at, he returns to the lineup last week with a 3-touchdown game. He's now finished as a fantasy QB1 in 2 of his 3 starts. And oh, by the way, the other start, he was QB14. So he has been very good. This is also a player who we know the last 2 seasons has put up top 12 fantasy stats on a per game basis. So we know he can do it. I think there was some doubt in him because of the injury and he missed a bunch of time, but he's back now. This team is getting healthier this week. I mean, the 5th highest implied team total. So they're going to score some points against the Panthers. And he's got the Browns. He's got a bye still to come. So that bumps his fantasy stock down a little bit. But his fantasy playoff schedule, one of the 5 easiest for quarterbacks. So this is a guy that's going to make a ton of noise here. Gets the Titans, the Colts, and the Bears from week 15 to week 17. I think he is somebody that people are going to be very happy that they either stashed during that injury or that they were able to pick up off the waiver wire, which I will admit I did in a couple of leagues where I've had some injuries with guys like Jaden Daniels or Joe Burrow. I think Purdy is somebody you're going to be very happy to have in your lineup the rest of the way, and you're going to be very happy to have him in your lineup on Monday night.
Chris, what do you got for me in this one?
So Harmon was pointing it out earlier. I'm looking at what can we expect from Ricky Pearsall. And I'm thinking he just needs some time, as to Harmon's point just a bit ago, because it's been almost 2 full months since we last saw Pearsall due to his PCL injury. And on the plus side, he came back to a full-time role within the 49ers passing game. He ran a route on 85% of Purdy's dropbacks, but it was Jawan Jennings and George Kittle really commanding some of those easier slot reps. I mean, the two combined for 47.6% of the snaps from the inside. And so meanwhile, Pearsall's 10.5% rate from the interior was less than half of where he was at from the earlier parts of the season, those first few weeks of the year before he went down with the injury. So there's a bit of what I was talking about earlier about Xavier Worthy and Chris Godwin. I mean, receivers that are trying to work their way back into the rhythm of their offense. I mean, it was 3 weeks of Kittle running 80% of the routes until his target rate got back to 20%. And then he was starting to consistently rip off explosive plays. Now for Pearsall, I think Harmon pointed out again earlier that he does have the right matchup in terms of being able to leverage some of his route running ability. We just watched Drake London smoke the Panthers for 119 yards on 7 catches. So I do think the defensive matchup lines up for it, but where he's at in terms of his rapport and being in sync with Brock Purdy, I mean, that's something at least that I'll be looking for in this matchup against the Panthers.
Well, I know, Harmon, you've got your eyes on a wide receiver on the other side. What do you got now?
Yeah, I'm looking at Tetairoa McMillan and how his ability and the usage of him moving around the formation really helped out Bryce Young last week. Bryce Young, 11 of 15 for 148 yards and a touchdown when throwing to receivers lined up in the slot against the Atlanta Falcons. That 148 yards was obviously the best of this past season. 8.5 EPA added when throwing to receivers in the slot, also the best of the season. And it was mostly McMillan doing some damage in there, but it was also a variety of other pass catchers as well. There was a chunk play to Jalen Coker, 1 catch for 15 yards from him in the slot. You had the touchdown to Tetairoa McMillan, when one of his 2 touchdowns when he was lined up in the slot. Season high from him production-wise in the slot as well. 4 targets most of the year, 31 receiving yards when lined up in the slot. But you also had yards after catch chances for Xavier Legette, 4 targets, 4 catches for Jatavian Sanders. You had Tommy Tremble getting in a 50-yard chunk run after catch type play for him as well. And this is, again, just if you're moving McMillan around, you're also going to get these chances for other players here. And while I know Canales has gotten some criticism, like, why didn't you do this earlier? Number one, it's a rookie receiver. Sometimes you just want them to specialize at one position before you start overloading them moving around the formation. But also, you got to remember, this receiver room didn't look like this early in the year. Legette wasn't really a plus player yet. Jalen Coker wasn't healthy. The tight end room was kind of in flux as well. Mitchell Evans also had a chunk play last week as well. So I think right now, I'm not trying to get too crazy optimistic about Bryce Young and this Panthers passing game, but this matchup against the Niners, if they're going to continue to use these players in the slot, especially McMillan, I do think this is a week where you can play Young, where you can get confident about McMillan, because the 49ers, they are bottom 2 against the defenders in the slot with a variety of metrics this year. So I think this is a good matchup for Carolina to do this once again this week.
All right, let's get thankful, guys. Obviously, it's a big week for everybody with Thanksgiving. So, Boone, Chris, why don't you guys get a little bit of thanks going for us?
I mean, we've had all these awesome graphics. So, yeah, we're going to get a little head start here on some Thanksgiving cheer. Chris, who is a player who you are so thankful for in fantasy? There's a lot we could pick from for sure. Who do you have your eye on?
So for me, I think the player that I'm most thankful for is Jackson Smith and Jigba. I mean, so Boone, no, you and I have to do the same thing over the offseason, right? Where we have to write these pieces about breakout sleepers. And it wasn't uncommon to see JSN as a common breakout candidate for the 2025 season. But the common thread was the bump in opportunity for him with DK Metcalf out of the picture. Not the idea of him becoming the most efficient wide receiver from a yards per run standpoint since the turn of the decade, or since the start of the decade, but and also not the idea of seeing him excel as not just an interior role player, as we had mentally kind of pigeonholed him in, but as a complete pass catcher, one that can perform on the outside and on the interior. I mean, so of course, as a fantasy manager, I'm thankful of his 21, 22 PPR points per game. And of course, I'm thankful that I haven't had to worry about keeping him in the lineup. I mean, he's been a top 10 receiver in 8 of his 10 games. But I think the thing I'm most thankful about is for how receivers like him should keep our minds open to how development isn't linear, and really trying to understand a player's strengths and not just their situation that we try and think of as a static thing moving forward. So for me, JSN is probably the player I'm most thankful for throughout the 2025 season.
Where were you a couple years ago when I traded him away in a dynasty league for Tank Dell and a first-round rookie pick? And yeah,
we were talking about weather. Great. That's the problem. We kept talking about weather throughout most offseason. That's why. Yeah.
Always weather on the mind. I'm sure we're going to again. We're getting to that time of year for sure. I'm going a different direction. I'm going to go to a guy that I got off the waiver wire in a ton of leagues. And I'm going back to the Monday night game that we talked about just earlier. Rico Dowdle, to me, is this guy. It is very rare that you can get a top 10 fantasy back off the waiver wire. You think back to last year, there weren't as many injuries at the running back position. We just didn't get that opportunity. This year, man, Rico Dowdle, when you picked him up, you got the huge games right away, that 200-yard game against Miami. Since then, he's been a top 5 fantasy running back on a per-game basis. But even if you look more recently, because of course Chuba came back, it kind of changed things for a little while, and then eventually the coaching staff was like, no, we got to go with Dowdle. Even in the last 3 weeks here, since they've kind of just given him the starter job with Chuba healthy, Dowdle's still the RB8 during that span. So he has been fantastic. When reporters have asked the coaches, like, maybe Chuba's getting healthier and maybe you go back to some sort of a committee, they shut that down right away. It was like, no, I think we're going to stick with exactly how we're doing it. They love what they're getting from him. We love what we're getting from him. And I am super thankful that Mr. Rico Dowdle has been this breakout guy off the waiver wire this year and showing us that last year with the Cowboys, it wasn't a fluke. He is a good running back, and he is somebody that deserves to get paid this offseason, whether it's in Carolina or whether it's somewhere else. All right, that's what we're thankful for. Let's get the guys back in here.
All right, boys, let's try to help everybody make some money. Harmon, let's bring in the noise, bring in the funk, and most importantly, bring in the props, a prop that we like this weekend. I'll give you one that I like in one of the biggest matchups, and that's Mahomes over on the passing yardage, 270.5. This is pretty simple to me. I talked earlier about the lack of balance for the Kansas City offense, which I don't think is going to fix itself. And while the Colts defense is certainly better on the back end than they were a month ago, this is still the Colts defense. It's 27th in the league right now against the pass, 5th against the run. So look, there's some situational reasons why I think it's played out that way over the course of the year. I do not trust this iteration of the Chiefs to come in and commit to trying to run the football, which means the only way that they're going to be able to stay competitive in a game that I think will have a lot of points is to throw the ball a lot of times. So I think Mahomes get volume. Volume equals yardage opportunity. Yardage equals the opportunity to make money. What do you got for me on a prop that you like?
Yeah, I'll go to an AFC team here as well. Stephon Diggs over 56.5 receiving yards here. We saw last week he ran a route on 89% of the dropbacks. That was a season high. It was only the second time this year he's been over an 80% route participation. He's kind of been a little bit, I wouldn't call him a part-time player, but he has been not been a full-time player yet. And I think this is one because the Patriots like to throw a lot at you from an offensive standpoint. They throw a lot of formations, personnel groupings, etc. But I also think they want to limit the wear and tear on Stephon Diggs' body. We're done with that now. Okay, like this team is trying to be a real deal contender, and it's time to unleash Diggs. We saw it last week. He has great chemistry with Drake May. I think he's going to be really good in this matchup here because, look, the Bengals, they do take away number one wide receivers. DJ Turner has been awesome this year, but Stephon Diggs also played a season high 66% in the slot last week. He's not just going to be a guy that sticks on the outside and gets sacrificed to that number one corner. I'm a little worried that Kayshon Boutte might be that guy. So I think that Diggs has a really productive game here, moving around the formation as the number one target for the New England Patriots against Cincinnati.
All right, let's put the boys back to work and get some quick bowl predictions in. Let's fly through some big bowl predictions. Chris Allen, you can go first since you just came off the bench. What you got for me? Bold. Make it spicy.
All right, we'll make it spicy. I mean, I think Harmon talked about him earlier. I'll say Jacoby Myers gets into the top 24 because he was already knocking on that door this past week with a 30% target rate, going up against the Cardinals, allowing the 12th highest passing success rate to wide receivers over their last 6 games. With Myers' opportunity and already showing the rapport with Trevor Lawrence, I think he should be the wide receiver, at least get into the wide receiver 2 conversation for week 12.
All right, Boone, got a bold prediction for me?
I hope it's bold enough. Jameson Williams posts his 3rd straight top 10 fantasy receiver finish. It's been on fire since their bye, right? 4 for 66 and 1, 6 for 119 and 1, 4 for 88 and 1. Now he gets to go back to his friendly confines at home in the Dome where they tend to be the best. And they're going up against the Giants, which is a very nice matchup as well. I think he's going to absolutely go off again.
Harmon, give me that spice.
Yeah, Boone talked about him a little bit earlier. I think Terrence Ferguson scores a touchdown this week. This guy is really good. He's just not fantasy relevant yet because he hasn't gotten the touches, but he's very athletic. He's a key player in their heavy personnel packages where he clears space because he's so fast for a tight end. I think we actually see some of that speed in this matchup this week, and he speeds his way into the end zone. He scores a touchdown here this week, and he's a rookie we can get excited about in dynasty leagues going forward.
I'll give you a quick one here. Play them defenses. Browns, Raiders defenses combined for more sacks than first downs in this game. How do you like that? Play them defenses.
That's good.
Ugly.
That's good.
Yeah, there we go.
All
right,
like
let's get everybody together for some hurry-up offense. 25 seconds on the clock. First question comes in from Coastal Elite. It says, already down 8 after Thursday Night Football. Boone and Harmon hooked me up last week with the Michael Wilson call. So Pearsall versus Carolina, Tez Johnson and Rams, Addison at Green Bay, or Boutte at Cincy in half PPR this week. All right, we'll give this one to Boone. What do you say, bub?
I'm going back to Pearsall. I thought he would come back with a better game last week. Obviously puts up the 0. I think this time around he's knocked the rust off. We're going to see him have a nice performance against Carolina on Monday night.
Oh, look at that. With time to spare. All right, we'll get the next question in. The next one coming in from Mijo Made It. Mijo Made It? Mijo Made It. We'll go with that. With Jacobs out, I need to start one of these guys in my flex. Please help Rachaad White, Downs, or Mitchell. All right, we'll go up to Chris Allen. What do you think?
So let's see. Out of that group, I definitely don't want Rachaad White. I mean, Sean Tucker has really clearly taken that spot from him. I look at either one of Josh Downs or A.D. Mitchell here, and just for the potential back and forth matchup between the Colts and the Chiefs, I'll give it to Josh Downs for this week.
All right, Michael Wood with the personal foul on this very long question. No, all right, we'll give this one to Harmon. Ask FFL, full PPR, tight end position, Theo Strange, Barner, or Loveland, and flex, ETN or Aaron Jones. Lot there. What do you got, Harmon?
All right, it's definitely ETN over Aaron Jones. I think that's the easier one there. In terms of this tight end amalgamation here, I really like that Brenton Strange is back. Risky to play him in his first game back, however. It's between Theo Johnson or Colson Loveland to me. I would go with Colson Loveland. All
right, the next question in comes. This one's going to go to Chris. This one comes from Bernardino Cardenas Jr. Y'all are killing me with these names. Who would you drop out of Emmanuel Wilson, David Montgomery, R.J. Harvey, and Ricky Pearsall? 3 wide receiver, PPR, 1 flex. Need to pick up a kicker. Think of Wilson, IR Benson Hampton. What do you got, Chris?
Oh, in terms of who you would drop out of that group, definitely not. Wouldn't want to drop David Montgomery. Neither of RJ Harvey. Oh my gosh. I think out of that group, if I'm going to drop any of them, I would say I'll go with RJ Harvey, and I don't like it, but I'll say Harvey.
There's just a lot that went wrong on that play. We're going to get right back to the line of scrimmage. We're going to try this all again. We're going to help Steve Weber with the next one. Nice, easy name. DK Watson, Pierce, or Algier. DK because he gets return yards worth 10 to 15 points every week. He's kind of answering it for us, Boone, but what do you think?
He is. If we're throwing in the return yards as well, then yeah, I would go with DK there. If not, if it weren't for that, it would be a bit of a coin flip between Pierce and Watson. I think I would still go with Pierce, but they're kind of ranked similarly as like very high-end wide receiver threes with a ton of upside. But because of return points, we got to go DK there.
And then we go back up to Harmon for Green and Gold, who says hashtag make your pick. Half PPR flex, AJ, Judkins, or Hunt. What do you think, Harmon?
Is AJ Brown? I mean, not enough information here on the simple AJ. I'm assuming it is, but I actually would play Quinshon Judkins regardless. Mentioned this at the top of the show, or what feels like a bajillion years ago at this point. But Quinshon Judkins actually in a competitive game where you mentioned it, the defenses are hunting here. I think that's the type of game script you want to play Quinshon Judkins in.
All right, the next one comes from Chicago-made Punk, all right, who says, hashtag make your pick, Judkins, Genty, or Bowers. Chris Allen, what do you think?
So out of that group, I mean, I do like the fact that Judkins going up against the Raiders defense and from the volume there, trying to take some pressure off for Shador. I like that versus trying to rely on either Bowers having to trying to at least keep Geno Smith upright, catching passes with Myles Garrett chasing after him. I'll go Judkins here.
And the profile picture took me to CM Punk. There we go. All right, I'm in it now. I had to figure that out. All right. That does it for this edition of Fantasy Football Live. We're back here every Sunday morning at 11:30 a.m. Eastern to help you get your lineup set. And we're around all week. Wake up early, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Monday through Friday. You can hang out with me and Caroline Fenton on Yahoo Sports Daily. Please hang out and check that out. Also, check out the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast live on Yahoo Fantasy YouTube. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. I hope it's safe and wonderful. I hope you get the time to celebrate with the people that you love the most. And I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday. Come back. See us Sunday. We appreciate you hanging out with us every week.